I think one of the interesting things about this community, who are incredibly diverse, the community known collectively as the Forgotten Australians, is that their experiences were as wide and varied as anyone growing up. Some of them had very positive and loving experiences. Quite a number of them didn't, and quite a number of them had far worse and suffered various forms of abuse, and quite a lot of them just a fairly loveless upbringing. So to try to find something that was a symbol of what these people had in common with one another, I guess I looked to that moment when Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, as he was then, gave the national apology, which he did in November 2009. I think it was the 16th of November. And in thinking about perhaps the one sole thing that could symbolise the shared experience that these individuals had, was to look to that very moment when most people who'd come through that experience and were known as the Forgotten Australians stood and watched, or sat in their lounge rooms, or deliberately turned off the radio because they didn't want to be a part of it. But in any case, that was a unifying experience. And so through one of the astronomers at the Melbourne Planetarium, I was able to obtain a map of the sky above us in Victoria as it was at 11 o'clock on that morning, which I used to symbolise that moment, which was the first time really that for these people their story was made public in that way. Part of the purpose of the work was also to be a meeting place for members of this community who might be travelling into Melbourne to meet one another, because they are, for most of them, the only family any of them have. And so in an environment that is very monumental in the scale of the architecture that's there, with some very strident lines, it was decided to make a piece that was quite low to the ground, that was quite soft. The colouring of the work, which is Castlemaine slate, ties in with the deeper greys around the area. So the work has a kind of reflective quality about it that relates to water and, if you like, the passage of the river behind the work. And it's a piece without being vertical or trying to conflict with the strength of architecturally what else is there in the site. It was about creating a piece that was quite still and low and accessible, and it could be touched, or it could be sat on, or it could be lied on. The work is obviously being visited by large numbers of people. Now, whether that's because they're little children who like to jump on it and sit on it, or whether because it's a big piece of black granite laid into the sandstone, into which there is this constellation inlaid, whether it's because it warms up on a sunny, cool day and people lie down to warm themselves. I mean, I kind of had all of that in my mind, and that the invitation to engage with it physically was always an integral part of the work. I do know that a week or so after it was launched, a friend of mine, leaving a show at the Recital Centre, went to see it about 11:30 at night, and he said there were 3 or 4 people sitting in a little huddle on the edge of it, and as he approached he realised they were sitting there having a bit of a weep, and so he just kept walking past and didn't get a chance to have a close look at the work out of respect for them. Well, making work in public spaces nowadays, I think you can pretty much separate into ephemeral and permanent. And ephemeral works are those where you're free to go ahead and conceive a work without the technical limitations that come with a piece needing to be, in colloquial terms, bomb-proof. You know, it's got to withstand the yobbo factor. It has to work spatially. It has to take into consideration everything else that's happening around it, the purpose of people's time there, the reason they're visiting, how they're passing, the eye lines, the speed at which they're going to see the work and from what distance. Every piece that you make for a public space that's designed to be a permanent work is a statement of its time. But it's important that over time, whilst pieces date, they shouldn't date too badly. So the fashions and the aesthetics of physical and architectural ornament, if you like, those sort of materials, the tastes in those come and go, and I think it's important to consider the more time, to think about how it's going to look and feel in 10 years or 20 years, and for the kind of work I make, I hope that the work's still going to be there looking just fine in 50 or 100.